Cemeteries are beloved ghost spots, and for good reason. Cemeteries all over Japan are famous for ghost sightings, and why wouldn't they be? They're the final resting places for generations of the dead. One particularly famous cemetery is that of Yahashira in Chiba Prefecture. Located roughly 20 kilometers from the center of Tokyo, this cemetery is open from 8 AM to 5 PM daily. And, if you believe the stories, there's a very good reason for that. The cemetery first opened in 1935 and takes up roughly 1 square kilometer of prime Chiba real estate. When seen from above, the cemetery is cut into squares with walking paths all over, as well as a looping oval almost shaped like a peanut that will take you on a leisurely stroll throughout. Families often visit the site for picnics, and there are many scenic sights to take in, such as the French geometry-styled gardens and a water tower that's shaped like a Buddhist tower. One website describes the cemetery as built in the valley of several slightly elevated knolls with a cheerful atmosphere. You can enjoy the cherry blossoms in spring, as well as the gorgeous Japanese maples in autumn. The park areas are especially famous for Japanese red pines, black pines, and zelkovas. The nearby schools also use the cemetery for school trips, marathons, and walking events. Interestingly, it's also the final resting place of Saijo Yaso, who you may know as the poet who wrote the infamous and apparently cursed Tomino's Hell. This all sounds great, so why is it known as one of the most fearsome ghost spots in all of Japan? Rumors of particular ghosts haunting Yahashira Cemetery have been around since at least the 1960s. Some of the most famous include the ghost of a woman said to stand near the Section 13 sign, a young couple sitting on a bench in Section 13, and a female ghost in Section 4, amongst others. You might also come across a man wearing a suit who stands in front of his own grave and beckons for you to come closer, or a shadowy figure that lurks near the sudden curve on the way to Section 13. It's said that if you see this ghost, you'll undoubtedly have an accident on your way home from the cemetery. It's also said that long ago, a woman hung herself from a tree in the park, and that tree was marked with tape. If you happen to find that exact tree, then you'll be cursed. And it's not the only thing. There's also a cursed bridge, and if you happen to look over the edge of it while crossing, well, that's a guaranteed curse as well. Finally, if you visit Section 13, there's a good chance that one of the many ghosts with no one left to tend their graves will follow you home, perhaps hoping for someone, anyone, to notice them and care for them in the afterlife. You may have noticed something in common with the great majority of these sightings. Almost all of them take place in Sections 13 and 4. This shouldn't come as a surprise, with 13 being an unlucky Western number and 4 being an unlucky Eastern number. Here in Yahashira Cemetery, both are bad luck. Both sections are also close to the entrance, with Section 4 lying just to the right and Section 13 off to the left. Section 4 happens to house a crypt, which is naturally an unsettling sight for most, while Section 13 sits near a reservoir. As you likely know by now, Japanese ghosts absolutely love water, as it acts as a type of conduit for them, and stagnant water especially so. If there's water, there's a good chance ghosts are nearby too. Both sections are almost designed to attract the other side. Yahashira Cemetery is also popular with teenagers and young adults looking to try some kimodameshi. This involves visiting a known ghost spot or scary location and walking around until someone chickens out. It's a test of one's bravery, and with how terrifying Yahashira is and the many tales of its ghosts, it's the perfect kimodameshi spot, and you can find all sorts of accounts on the internet of people heading into the cemetery after dark to scare each other silly. Yet, if you remember earlier, I mentioned the cemetery's open times. That's right, the cemetery has opening times. It's open from 8 AM to 5 PM, meaning it's closed when many of these people supposedly visit it for their kimodameshi. Is it possible these people are jumping the fence and sneaking in without permission? Of course. It certainly wouldn't be the first time, and while sections of the fence would make this very difficult, there are other sections that people could easily slip over and into the park. But there's a good reason for the open and close times as well. These came into effect roughly 10 years ago because of an increase in crime in the area. It's said that businessmen in particular were constantly under attack by groups of violent youths. Why this was happening around the cemetery is unknown, but violent gangs have been known to hang out in that general area, so perhaps they naturally gravitated towards the large cemetery. In response, it was decided to close it before dark, so people no longer had a reason to hang around. It appears to have worked, as violent crimes in the area have since decreased. In 2012, filmmaker and author Mori Tatsuya released a book called A Cult. In it, he detailed his visits to various ghost spots around Japan, including Yahashira Cemetery. He learnt of the cemetery from a man referred to only as H-san, a colleague of his who grew up in the area. The author visited Yahashira with a man by the name of Akiyama. Akiyama was able to see ghosts, so Mori wanted to see if the legends about the cemetery were real or not. Reportedly, they struggled to even get there, as their car navigation seemed to constantly lead them away and not towards the cemetery. By the time they finally got there, it was after 7 PM, and thus, the cemetery was closed. Mori took that as a sign that they perhaps shouldn't be there in the first place, but having gone all that way, they tried to look in from the other side of the fence. Akiyama then pointed beyond the trees. "There's a soldier," he said. "Everyone's wearing military uniforms, but not from the Second World War. They're older than that. Maybe the First World War. They're clean. Sabers are hanging from their hips." According to Akiyama, the cemetery was indeed incredibly haunted, and even from outside, he could see ghosts everywhere on the inside. He didn't have to go in to be able to see them. The author also reported that his colleague, H-san, told him that when he was in high school, he and his fellow classmates often saw ghosts hanging around not just inside the cemetery, but outside it as well. We often saw them on the street corner. They were there like it was the most normal thing in the world. I don't think the people who live nearby think ghosts are anything special at all. While it's most definitely a cemetery, with hundreds upon hundreds of graves taking up the equivalent of 20 Tokyo domes, Yahashira also has numerous public parks and sites for visitors to see when they visit, and it's not uncommon for people to visit merely to take a stroll through the beautiful trees in spring and autumn. Numerous ghost stories have built up around it over the years, and the early closing times have certainly helped with those legends. It's important to remember that Yahashira Cemetery is the final resting place for many, many people, however, and as fun as the stories are, respect needs to be shown if ever visiting. Is it haunted? Many say yes. But whether you believe that is up to you. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time.